On January 20, 2010, a man was discovered dead inside his room at the luxurious Al Bustan Rotana Hotel in Dubai. That man was Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, a senior Hamas military commander, whose sudden death would ignite one of the most extraordinary international investigations of modern times. At first glance, his passing seemed deceptively ordinary, a middle-aged man succumbing quietly in the night. The hotel staff reported no struggle, no disturbance, and no sign of forced entry. But within hours, whispers spread that this was no accident. Security footage revealed strangers moving with uncanny precision through the hotel's corridors. They arrived in small groups, blending seamlessly with the ebb and flow of international travelers. Their disguises were ordinary, but their coordination was flawless. Each carried passports from different Western nations, but later analysis revealed them to be expertly forged. Behind the locked door of room 230, forensic teams would later uncover subtle but chilling clues: traces of muscle relaxants, evidence of tampered locks, and an absence of fingerprints where they should have been. Dubai authorities quickly realized that this was not the work of petty criminals or personal rivals. It bore the hallmarks of a state-level operation. The death of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was more than the silencing of a militant. It was a signal, a shadowy message sent across borders and oceans. Who had the means, the motive, and the audacity to carry out such a brazen act in the heart of one of the world's safest cities? The killing of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was not merely a criminal event, it was a geopolitical earthquake. Al-Mabhouh was no ordinary man. As one of the founders of Hamas's military wing, he was deeply involved in weapons procurement, secret financing, and covert negotiations stretching from Tehran to Damascus. His reach extended far beyond the borders of Gaza, connecting him with some of the most volatile regimes and networks in the Middle East. His death threatened to disrupt fragile alliances, redraw intelligence calculations, and provoke retaliatory strikes. The stakes became evident almost immediately. Dubai's police chief publicly declared that the operation bore the fingerprints of a sophisticated intelligence agency, and suspicion fell swiftly upon Mossad, Israel's feared clandestine service. If true, this meant Israel had once again extended its long arm into foreign territory to eliminate a sworn enemy, regardless of sovereign boundaries or diplomatic fallout. Western capitals shuddered as the details emerged. Forged European passports had been used in the operation, implicating nations such as Britain, France, Germany, and Ireland. Suddenly, intelligence agencies across the world were asking themselves, had their identities been hijacked for an assassination mission? The international rules of engagement appeared to have been rewritten overnight. In Gaza, crowds mourned while vowing vengeance. In Tehran and Damascus, the killing was viewed as an attack on their regional axis of influence. And in Tel Aviv, if the accusations were true, the message was unmistakable. No adversary was beyond reach. No sanctuary was truly safe. Who orchestrated the death of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh inside a fortress-like hotel in one of the world's most secure cities? Was it truly Mossad, acting on orders from the highest echelons of Israeli power, or could another intelligence service have played a hidden hand? Was his killing meant as punishment for decades of smuggling weapons into Gaza, or as a warning to those who dared to build bridges with Iran? Why was Dubai chosen as the stage? A city of glass towers and relentless surveillance, where every movement is captured by cameras, seemed like an unlikely hunting ground for an elite assassination squad. Was the choice deliberate, designed to send a message that no amount of security could prevent the inevitable? Who provided the intelligence that pinpointed his exact movements, down to his arrival on Emirates Flight EK912 from Damascus? Who signed off on the operation, knowing it would unleash diplomatic fury and expose methods long shrouded in secrecy? And most hauntingly, what was the ultimate objective? Was the killing of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh a strike of necessity, a desperate act in a shadow war, or a chilling demonstration of power by an agency determined to show the world its reach? Mahmoud Abdel Razzak al-Mabhouh was born in 1960 in the Jabalia refugee camp, located in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. His family, like thousands of others, had been displaced during the turmoil of 1948, carrying with them stories of lost homes and fractured lives. The camp was a harsh place to grow up, overcrowded and impoverished, with rows of concrete shelters standing as monuments to exile. In this environment, resilience was not a choice, but a necessity. His father worked tirelessly in menial jobs, while his mother carried the weight of raising a large family in conditions of scarcity. Water was rationed, electricity unreliable, and opportunities for education limited. Yet, Mahmoud distinguished himself early as a boy of sharp instincts, quick temper, and a restless spirit. Teachers noted his impatience with authority and his refusal to accept the constraints imposed by occupation and poverty. As he grew older, the realities of life in Gaza shaped his worldview. Israeli patrols were a constant presence, curfews interrupted daily routines, and the violence of the conflict was never far away. Mahmoud witnessed clashes between demonstrators and soldiers, and he absorbed the grief of funerals that became almost weekly rituals. The young boy transformed into a determined adolescent with an unshakable sense of grievance. Friends later recalled how he would spend hours discussing the history of Palestine, memorizing speeches of leaders, and drawing crude maps of villages his family had been forced to abandon. The camp gave him no wealth, but it gave him purpose, and that purpose would soon define his life. From adolescence into adulthood, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's worldview hardened into a doctrine that combined faith, nationalism, and militancy. Religion was not merely ritual for him, but a source of resilience, a framework that explained suffering and offered redemption through struggle. He was deeply influenced by the teachings of the Muslim Brotherhood, which had begun to permeate Gaza's mosques and schools during the 1970s. These ideas crystallized his conviction that resistance was not just political but sacred, a duty before God and people alike. Those close to him observed peculiar habits that revealed both discipline and obsession. He was meticulous in personal routines, rising early for prayer regardless of the circumstances, even during periods of hiding. He carried notebooks filled with detailed records of contacts, transactions, and ideas, always written in a coded shorthand only he understood. Friends said he disliked unnecessary chatter, preferring silence or focused discussions about strategy and theology. Al-Mabhouh was also known for his temper, which could erupt over minor slights but just as quickly fade. He held grudges quietly, nursing them until an opportunity for action emerged. Despite his severity, he showed unexpected tenderness toward children, often playing with his younger siblings and later with his own, creating moments of warmth within an otherwise austere life. To his allies, these qualities made him dependable and relentless. To his adversaries, they marked him as dangerous and unpredictable. His ideology demanded constant vigilance, while his quirks kept him both human and enigmatic. A man who blended personal discipline with unyielding militancy, shaped by a conviction that his destiny was inseparable from his people's struggle. Over the years, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh accumulated nicknames that reflected both fear and admiration. Among his comrades in Hamas, he was often referred to as Abu al-Abed, a traditional honorific drawn from his role as a father. Within militant circles, he was whispered about as the Merchant of Death, a moniker tied to his reputation as a tireless smuggler of weapons into Gaza. His ability to secure arms from distant suppliers in Iran and Sudan, and to move them through clandestine routes across deserts and seas, gave him an aura of myth. Al-Mabhouh himself cultivated an image of resilience and defiance. He often told confidants that he was not afraid of dying, only of being forgotten. Photographs show him with a stern expression, often dressed in simple attire, deliberately avoiding ostentation. Yet behind the severity, there was a man keenly aware of his own legend. He knew his survival against repeated attempts on his life made him a symbol, not only for Hamas but for the wider Palestinian cause. Every nickname, every tale of his exploits, reinforced that self-image. A man who could outwit enemies, a soldier chosen by history to live dangerously, and, if necessary, to die dramatically. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's transition from restless youth to committed militant was neither sudden nor accidental. It unfolded in the cauldron of Gaza's political and social upheaval during the late 1970s and early 1980s. The refugee camp that shaped him also provided fertile ground for radicalization. With opportunities limited and the conflict escalating, young men were drawn into underground networks that promised purpose and dignity. Al-Mabhouh's first steps were modest, attending meetings, distributing pamphlets, and joining demonstrations against Israeli patrols. His arrests during these protests exposed him to interrogation rooms, where he tasted the harshness of occupation. Each encounter deepened his hostility and convinced him that compromise was an illusion. It was during this time that he gravitated toward figures aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, who later formed the nucleus of Hamas. Their blend of ideology and action resonated with his belief that only force could restore lost lands. By the mid-1980s, he had become more than a protester. He was involved in clandestine cells tasked with securing weapons and planning operations. His aptitude for logistics distinguished him from others, and soon he was entrusted with missions that extended beyond Gaza's borders. Politics and militancy fused into one for him. Every gun smuggled, every alliance secured, was both a political statement and a military act. For al-Mabhouh, the path ahead was set. No longer the boy of Jabalia dreaming of return, he had become a soldier in a cause that would define his existence, a man stepping firmly into the shadows of clandestine war. The life and death of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh cannot be understood without examining the wider conflict that consumed his generation. At its heart was the Israeli-Palestinian struggle, a bitter confrontation born from the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. For families like al-Mabhouh's, who were forced into refugee camps in Gaza, the conflict was not an abstraction, but a daily reality of dispossession, poverty, and military occupation. The Gaza Strip became a flashpoint, a sliver of land where an entire population lived under siege-like conditions. Israeli control brought checkpoints, military raids, and restrictions that fostered resentment. Meanwhile, Palestinian political factions splintered. Fatah sought negotiation and diplomacy, while emerging groups like Hamas rejected compromise and advocated armed resistance. This division created a landscape of competing strategies, each vying to define the national struggle. Regional wars compounded the intensity. The Six-Day War of 1967, which left Israel in control of Gaza and the West Bank, hardened attitudes on both sides. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 reinforced Arab hostility and Israeli determination to secure borders. By the time Hamas was founded in 1987, the First Intifada had erupted, marked by widespread protests, stone-throwing youth, and brutal crackdowns. Into this volatile arena stepped men like al-Mabhouh. The broader conflict was not simply about territory, but about identity, survival, and legitimacy. Every battle, every assassination, every truce was part of a larger story of a people divided and a land contested. It was in this furnace of unending struggle that al-Mabhouh found both his calling and his justification, convinced that history itself demanded his role in the fight. The killing of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh resonated far beyond the streets of Gaza, because the conflict in which he played a role was never confined to Palestinians and Israelis alone. It was a regional contest, with states aligning themselves as patrons, adversaries, or cautious mediators. Each country's position reflected its own ambitions, fears, and alliances, and al-Mabhouh's activities intersected with many of these currents. Iran stood foremost as a benefactor. Through funding, training, and weapons, Tehran saw Hamas as both a proxy and a partner in its broader campaign to challenge Israel's legitimacy. Al-Mabhouh, through his arms deals, was one of the crucial conduits connecting Gaza to Iran's military support networks. Syria, under the Assad regime, provided safe haven for Hamas leaders in Damascus, offering political backing and logistical access. These alliances placed al-Mabhouh squarely within a powerful but controversial axis. On the other side, Israel regarded al-Mabhouh as a direct and existential threat. For decades, Israeli intelligence pursued him relentlessly, viewing his smuggling operations as pipelines for rockets and explosives that endangered its citizens. Egypt, though historically hostile to Israel, often found itself in the uneasy role of mediator, seeking to contain Hamas while protecting its own fragile peace agreements. Western countries added further complexity. The United States and European Union designated Hamas as a terrorist organization, restricting its financial channels, yet debates within these capitals revealed tensions between security priorities and humanitarian concerns. Meanwhile, Gulf states like Qatar oscillated between discreet support and public neutrality, using Hamas as both bargaining chip and symbol. In this crowded landscape, al-Mabhouh was more than an individual. He was a node in a network of alliances and rivalries, a man whose movements rippled through the delicate balance of Middle Eastern geopolitics. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh mattered because he embodied the hidden machinery that sustained Hamas's military power. While public leaders delivered speeches and negotiators engaged in diplomacy, al-Mabhouh operated in the shadows, forging the pipelines that transformed ideology into weapons. He was not a mere fighter. He was a facilitator, a man who built the logistical arteries connecting Gaza to arms suppliers across the Middle East. His reputation stemmed largely from his success in establishing smuggling routes that defied border controls and blockades. From Sudanese deserts to Iranian warehouses, al-Mabhouh orchestrated the transfer of rifles, rockets, and explosives that bolstered Hamas's arsenal. His ability to navigate across nations, slipping past surveillance, made him indispensable to the organization. Unlike political figures vulnerable to compromise, al-Mabhouh's loyalty to militancy never wavered. For Israel, his significance was existential. Every shipment traced back to him represented lives at risk inside its borders. Intelligence assessments identified him as a keystone figure. Remove him, and the flow of weapons would be disrupted, if only temporarily. For Hamas, his survival symbolized resilience. His evasion of earlier assassination attempts turned him into a legend, reinforcing the idea that he was protected by destiny. Globally, al-Mabhouh's activities revealed the porous nature of borders and the complicity, or at least tolerance, of states willing to look away. He was proof that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was not local, but international, entangling capitals from Tehran to Khartoum, from Damascus to Dubai. His presence in this shadow war explained why his death would be pursued with such precision, and why it would reverberate across continents. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's rise into militancy began with small but daring acts that marked him as a man willing to cross boundaries others feared. In the early 1980s, he was implicated in several local attacks on Israeli patrols near Gaza, operations that involved crude weapons and hit-and-run tactics. Though minor compared to what would follow, these incidents revealed his appetite for risk and his ability to rally young men around him. By 1989, his reputation took a decisive turn. That year, al-Mabhouh, along with an accomplice, carried out the kidnapping and killing of 2 Israeli soldiers, Avi Sasportas and Ilan Saadon. The act shocked Israel and cemented his image as a militant of consequence. It was not simply the violence of the deed, but the planning behind it that demonstrated his evolution from protester to operator. Arrests soon followed. Israeli authorities detained him multiple times, though he often benefited from the overcrowded prisons and political pressure that led to periodic releases. Each imprisonment deepened his commitment rather than weakening it. Behind bars, he made contacts with other militants, learning tactics, strategies, and the art of survival under constant surveillance. By the time he emerged from these cycles of arrest and release, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was no longer an impulsive youth. He was a hardened operative, convinced that only escalation could achieve results. His early crimes marked the foundation of a career that would span continents, placing him firmly on the radar of Israel's intelligence services and setting him on a collision course with destiny. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's experiences in Israeli prisons became central to his mythology and self-image. Detained repeatedly throughout the 1980s, he claimed to have endured harsh interrogations that sought not only information, but psychological submission. Accounts from fellow prisoners suggest that he was subjected to extended solitary confinement, sleep deprivation, and physical beatings designed to break his will. Rather than weakening him, these ordeals seemed to reinforce his conviction. He later described prison as a school of resistance, a place where militants shared knowledge, built networks, and refined strategies. For al-Mabhouh, captivity became proof of his sacrifice and his legitimacy as a fighter. Stories of his endurance spread among Hamas circles, enhancing his credibility as a man who would never capitulate. Whether all of his claims of torture were literal truth or embellished for effect, their impact was undeniable. They hardened his personal resolve and elevated his status within the militant movement. The image of a man who had stared into the machinery of Israeli power and refused to yield made him not just a participant, but a symbol of defiance. By the mid-1980s, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh had moved beyond street-level militancy into the structured world of organized resistance. He became a key member of the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was laying the ideological and organizational groundwork for a new movement. When Hamas formally emerged in 1987, during the eruption of the First Intifada, al-Mabhouh was among its earliest adherents, embracing its fusion of religious doctrine and armed struggle. His role quickly distinguished him from ordinary fighters. Where others focused on direct clashes with Israeli forces, al-Mabhouh concentrated on building capacity. He was instrumental in forming cells that specialized in procuring and hiding weapons, a task that required discretion, ingenuity, and trust. His ability to source arms from outside Gaza gave him value beyond his years, making him indispensable to Hamas's evolving military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades. Within the group, al-Mabhouh was both respected and feared. He was known for demanding discipline and secrecy, warning recruits that betrayal or carelessness could cost lives. Yet his willingness to risk his own safety in operations earned him loyalty. Over time, his stature grew from local commander to a figure trusted with regional missions. Through Hamas, al-Mabhouh found the perfect vehicle for his ambitions. It gave him ideology, structure, and reach. He, in turn, gave the movement logistical genius and relentless energy. This partnership between man and movement would soon escalate into operations that crossed borders and challenged the world's most formidable intelligence services. As the 1990s unfolded, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh expanded his activities far beyond Gaza's confines, becoming one of Hamas's foremost logisticians of violence. His reputation was cemented not only through his early kidnappings, but through his ability to design networks that bypassed blockades and patrols. Using Bedouin smugglers in Sinai, forged documents, and hidden storage depots, he oversaw the flow of arms from Sudan and Iran into Gaza. These operations supplied the rockets and rifles that fueled Hamas's armed campaign. Kidnapping remained one of his preferred tactics. Al-Mabhouh believed it was a dual-purpose weapon, a means of securing prisoner exchanges and a method of psychological warfare. Stories circulated of his involvement in attempts to abduct Israeli soldiers, some successful, others foiled, each feeding his notoriety. For Hamas, such actions carried propaganda value. For Israel, they were unforgivable provocations demanding a response. Killings also marked his rise. Beyond the 1989 slayings of Israeli soldiers Avi Sasportas and Ilan Saadon, he was linked to operations that targeted collaborators suspected of aiding Israeli intelligence. In Gaza, whispers of his ruthlessness traveled quickly, underscoring the risks of crossing him or his organization. Each escalation tightened the net around him. Israeli intelligence tracked his movements, while international security services began noting his presence in arms trafficking dossiers. But al-Mabhouh thrived in danger, convinced that risk was not a deterrent, but a necessary companion in his chosen path. The chronology of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's operations reads like a ledger of escalating defiance. In February 1989, he orchestrated the abduction of Israeli soldier Avi Sasportas, whose disappearance sparked a nationwide manhunt. Weeks later, the soldier's body was found buried near Gaza, a chilling message of Hamas's resolve. In May of the same year, al-Mabhouh repeated the act with soldier Ilan Saadon, again employing deception and ambush to deadly effect. These incidents propelled him into Israel's spotlight, placing him high on the Shin Bet and Mossad watch lists. By the early 1990s, his activities shifted outward. Intelligence sources traced him to Sudan, where he negotiated shipments of weapons from Iranian suppliers. Convoys of trucks transported arms through desert routes, destined for tunnels leading into Gaza. Israeli drones and satellites hunted for these routes, but al-Mabhouh frequently slipped away, altering paths and identities with precision. In 2003, reports emerged of his presence in Damascus, where he established operational links with Hezbollah and Iranian Revolutionary Guard officials. His role evolved into that of a coordinator, managing networks that spanned continents. Each operation became more sophisticated, each appearance more fleeting. Every step in his journey, from kidnappings to smuggling, deepened his status as both a hero to his followers and a marked man to his enemies. Each success carried him closer to the inevitable reckoning. By the late 1990s, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's name had become synonymous with danger in Israeli intelligence circles. His orchestration of kidnappings and killings, combined with his success in smuggling weapons, elevated him from a local militant to an international threat. Israeli security services placed him on their most wanted lists, not only for his past crimes, but for his ongoing ability to replenish Hamas's arsenal. Every intelligence report painted him as a linchpin in the machinery of resistance. He had connections in Tehran, Damascus, Khartoum, and beyond. His ability to evade capture only heightened his legend. For Mossad, this elusiveness was intolerable. If Hamas could not be stopped politically, then its logistics must be severed, and al-Mabhouh was the vital artery. Western nations also began tracking his movements. Although Hamas was already designated a terrorist organization by the United States and European Union, al-Mabhouh's name surfaced in dossiers concerning illicit arms flows through the Middle East. Interpol notices flagged him, and regional governments debated how to handle his presence. Some turned a blind eye, unwilling to risk confrontation with Hamas or its allies. Others quietly shared intelligence with Israel, recognizing the potential danger of his operations. By the mid-2000s, al-Mabhouh lived in near-permanent exile, moving between Damascus and other safe houses. He traveled cautiously, using aliases and frequently changing routines, yet he continued to oversee arms deals. His evasion of multiple capture attempts convinced his followers that he was protected by Providence. For Mossad, however, he was no longer merely a priority. He was a target whose elimination had become a matter of state policy. Long before his final hours in Dubai, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh had survived multiple attempts on his life. Each incident reinforced his reputation as a man living on borrowed time, constantly pursued yet perpetually escaping. Israeli intelligence units tried repeatedly to intercept him, often coming close but failing to deliver the fatal strike. In the early 1990s, following the killings of Israeli soldiers, al-Mabhouh was reportedly targeted by car bombs planted along his usual routes in Gaza. He altered his travel patterns at the last moment, escaping explosions that claimed others. Later, in Damascus, rumors circulated of poisoned food and drink meant for him, planted by double agents posing as suppliers. Al-Mabhouh, suspicious by nature, insisted on strict rules. Never eat what others prepared. Never accept gifts without testing them first. There were also reports of drone surveillance tracking him during trips through Sudan and Egypt. Israeli drones shadowed convoys that he was believed to be part of, striking vehicles only to discover that he had switched cars at the last minute. Each failure sharpened Mossad's determination. The message within Israeli intelligence was clear. This man could not remain alive indefinitely. For al-Mabhouh, these brushes with death became a twisted source of pride. He spoke openly to confidants that death is near but not yet written, framing his survival as proof of divine protection. But each attempt closed in more tightly, and each escape left him more isolated, more hunted. His life had become a countdown, though no one could predict where or when the final strike would land. By the late 2000s, the sense of inevitability surrounding Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's fate was undeniable. Each journey he undertook carried the weight of surveillance. Each meeting was shadowed by suspicion. Friends warned him to curtail his travels, but he refused, arguing that his mission was greater than his safety. He moved from Damascus to Tehran, from Sudan to the Gulf, weaving through airports and border posts, with the confidence of a man convinced that destiny could be delayed but never denied. For Mossad, his continued survival was intolerable. Internal briefings increasingly described him not as a fugitive, but as a priority target whose elimination was only a matter of time. Every failed attempt, every near miss, tightened the circle. What remained was not the question of if he would be killed, but when and how. The inevitability hung like a shadow over his final months. Al-Mabhouh's growing notoriety, his fearless proclamations, and his indispensable role in Hamas's logistics made him the perfect candidate for a high-profile strike. The stage was set, and the hunters were already closing in. On January 18, 2010, the first wave of operatives landed quietly in Dubai. They arrived on commercial flights from Zurich, Frankfurt, and Paris, blending seamlessly with the tide of businessmen and tourists entering the Emirates. Each carried a passport bearing a legitimate-looking European identity, yet every document was a carefully crafted forgery, linked to unsuspecting citizens whose identities had been stolen. The operatives moved with professional calm, never together, never drawing attention. Some posed as tennis enthusiasts, carrying rackets and sports bags. Others adopted the appearance of vacationers, smiling for cameras at passport control. Their aliases, names like Peter Elvinger, Gail Folliard, and Kevin Daveron, were chosen to evoke ordinary Western travelers. Dubai International Airport, with its sweeping surveillance systems, recorded their arrival, but nothing seemed unusual. Hotels across the city became temporary bases as they checked in separately, always maintaining the illusion of strangers. In reality, they were members of an elite Mossad strike team, coordinated with precision from Tel Aviv. Over the next 24 hours, more agents would arrive, until the squad numbered over 24. Their mission was clear: track, trap, and terminate Mahmoud al-Mabhouh. The hunters had entered the city, and the stage was now set for the most audacious assassination Dubai had ever witnessed. Once inside Dubai, the operatives established a network of surveillance that appeared ordinary to the casual eye. On January 19, 2010, pairs of agents checked into hotels strategically positioned near the Al-Bustan Rotana, where Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was expected to stay. Each room booking was made under forged European identities, complete with credit cards issued in the same names, ensuring a veneer of legitimacy. Inside the lobbies and corridors, agents carried innocuous shopping bags or sports gear, but hidden within were encrypted communication devices. They used short bursts of coded transmissions to relay updates back to command. Security cameras captured their movements, men and women in casual clothes, crossing paths without acknowledgement, yet synchronized in purpose. Surveillance began immediately. One team shadowed al-Mabhouh from the moment he landed on Emirates Flight EK912 from Damascus. Another monitored his movements once he arrived at the hotel, noting the time he checked into room 230. Agents disguised as tourists followed him into elevators, ensuring his keycard usage was logged and routines documented. Every step of his stay was mapped. They knew when he dined, when he visited the lobby, and how long he remained in his room. By the evening of January 19th, the operatives had achieved near total control of their target's environment. The trap was ready to close. January 20th, 2010, began like any other day at the Al-Bustan Rotana Hotel. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, weary from travel, conducted routine business calls and met briefly with contacts in the city. To him, Dubai was meant to be a short stopover, another link in the endless chain of meetings and transactions that defined his life. To the operatives shadowing him, however, this was the culmination of months of planning. From the early morning, surveillance units rotated in shifts, ensuring that no move went unwatched. 2 agents posed as joggers outside the hotel, another as a couple near the lobby, while yet others lingered at the poolside. Every angle of approach to room 230 was covered. At 2:30 p.m., al-Mabhouh left the hotel briefly for errands. Within minutes, the strike team entered motion. Using duplicate electronic keys, crafted from compromised hotel lock data, agents rehearsed access to his room in his absence. Another pair installed surveillance equipment in the corridor, allowing them to monitor without arousing suspicion. By late afternoon, he returned, unaware that his final hours had already been scripted. He retired to his room, made a series of phone calls, and prepared to rest. Outside, the assassins converged, timing their approach with precision. At approximately 8:30 p.m., 4 core operatives assembled near the elevator, disguises impeccable, movements unremarkable. Security footage later showed them entering the corridor within seconds of one another, their target oblivious behind the closed door. The operation had entered its decisive phase. What followed would unfold with clinical efficiency, leaving behind a death scene staged to resemble the quiet passing of a man alone in a foreign hotel. The operatives carried no weapons that would raise suspicion at airport security. Instead, their arsenal was built from precision tools designed for stealth and deniability. Chief among them was the electronic keycard system override. Using specialized equipment, they cloned Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's room key after observing its use at the reception desk. This allowed them to slip inside without leaving any trace of forced entry. Once inside room 230, they deployed chemical agents. Forensic investigators later found evidence of a muscle relaxant injected into al-Mabhouh, rendering him immobile within moments. A pillow was then used to suffocate him, leaving behind no obvious signs of struggle. The method was chosen to mimic natural causes, ensuring initial confusion for medical examiners. Communication between the team was conducted through encrypted devices disguised as everyday cell phones. Short bursts of data were transmitted back to Tel Aviv, updating handlers in real time. Portable surveillance cameras concealed in shopping bags were used to monitor hotel corridors, ensuring that the strike team would not be interrupted. Every detail of the operation reflected meticulous planning, from forged passports to tampered locks, from medical-grade toxins to innocuous disguises. The tools of the mission were not merely instruments of death, but instruments of deception, crafted to mask murder as misfortune. Despite the precision of the operation, danger lurked in every corridor. Surveillance cameras captured moments where agents nearly brushed shoulders with hotel staff, any slip capable of unraveling months of planning. One operative, disguised as a tennis player, walked past a security guard seconds before the strike team entered the elevator. Another lingered too long in the lobby, nervously glancing at his watch as families checked in nearby. Inside the hotel, timing was everything. The assassins had to avoid guests stepping off elevators, maids entering adjacent rooms, or unexpected visits to the target. In one recorded moment, a member of the team walked past al-Mabhouh himself in the corridor earlier that day, exchanging nothing more than a glance. The entire operation balanced on such knife-edge encounters, where exposure could have meant arrest or worse, an international scandal in real time. Yet, the operatives pressed forward with icy composure. Each close call underscored their training, their ability to adapt without hesitation. For Mossad, this was the nature of clandestine warfare. Missions carried out, not in distant battlefields, but in crowded hotels where the thin line between invisibility and exposure was measured in seconds. At approximately 8:45 p.m. on January 20, 2010, the strike team made its final move. Using the cloned keycard, 2 operatives entered room 230, while others maintained watch in the corridor. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, already inside and preparing to rest, had no chance to resist. A swift injection delivered a paralyzing muscle relaxant, leaving him conscious but unable to move. He was forced onto the bed where a pillow was pressed firmly against his face until his breathing stopped. The entire act lasted only minutes, executed with clinical detachment. No loud struggle, no evidence of forced entry, no telltale fingerprints. The room was meticulously arranged to suggest a natural death. Al-Mabhouh's body placed neatly on the bed, the television left on, belongings untouched. By 9 p.m., the team withdrew, slipping back through the corridors as if nothing had occurred. Within hours, they were scattering across the globe, departing Dubai on flights to Europe, Asia, and Africa. For hotel staff, it would be nearly a full day before the body was discovered. By then, the assassins were long gone, and a mystery had been born, one that would ignite headlines, expose networks, and force governments to confront the audacity of covert power. On the afternoon of January 21, 2010, hotel staff at the Al Bustan Rotana became concerned when room 230 remained unresponsive to repeated calls. A security officer was dispatched, knocking politely before unlocking the door with a master key. Inside, the scene appeared deceptively calm. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh lay on the bed, fully clothed, his head resting against the pillow. The air conditioning hummed softly, the television still glowing in the corner. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. There were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no obvious injuries. Staff assumed the guest had passed away from natural causes, perhaps a heart attack brought on by travel and stress. His passport and belongings were neatly arranged, further suggesting an ordinary death. Only later, when police investigators and medical examiners arrived, did the inconsistencies begin to emerge. Why were there no fingerprints on surfaces that should have carried them? Why did the electronic lock record unusual entries during his absence the previous afternoon? The discovery of his body, initially a quiet incident in a luxury hotel, was about to unravel into an international storm. Dubai's calm image of security was about to be shattered. When Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's body was taken for examination, initial observations pointed toward natural causes. His age, combined with the absence of visible wounds, seemed consistent with a fatal cardiac arrest. Yet, the autopsy soon revealed disturbing anomalies. Medical examiners discovered traces of a fast-acting muscle relaxant in his bloodstream, a compound designed to paralyze without leaving immediate, obvious signs. There were also subtle marks on his skin, tiny punctures consistent with an injection, faint abrasions that could indicate restraint. Examination of his lungs suggested suffocation, a deprivation of oxygen concealed beneath the guise of sleep. What first appeared to be a quiet death in bed was, in fact, a meticulously staged killing. Dubai authorities, shocked by the findings, concluded quickly that this was a professional assassination. The combination of chemical immobilization and suffocation was characteristic of intelligence tradecraft, not criminal improvisation. The medical results turned the case from a hotel mystery into an act of state-level intrigue. With this revelation, investigators shifted their focus to the hotel's vast surveillance network. Somewhere in its archives of camera footage, they suspected, lay the movements of a highly trained team that had transformed Room 230 into a silent crime scene. Dubai's police chief ordered an exhaustive review of the hotel's surveillance system. What investigators uncovered was a sequence of movements so deliberate, so synchronized, that it appeared almost cinematic. Cameras showed teams of men and women arriving separately at the airport, each carrying forged passports from countries such as the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, and Germany. These documents, later confirmed as fraudulent, had been crafted with such precision that they passed immigration controls without suspicion. Footage from the Al Bustan Rotana revealed operatives disguised as tourists, athletes, and business travelers. Some carried tennis rackets, others strolled casually with shopping bags, yet each was part of the same mission. They never appeared together in groups larger than two, but their paths converged around Mahmoud al-Mabhouh. Cameras captured them shadowing him from the airport to the hotel, entering elevators moments after him, and loitering in corridors near Room 230. The revelation of stolen identities caused international outrage. Several of the forged passports matched real citizens of European countries, whose identities had been hijacked without their knowledge. Governments in London, Dublin, Berlin, and Paris demanded explanations, summoning Israeli ambassadors for urgent discussions. The CCTV footage, broadcast publicly by Dubai authorities, shattered the illusion of invisibility. The assassins' faces were now global headlines, and the scandal over stolen passports transformed the operation from a hidden strike into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. The exposure of the assassination squad triggered a diplomatic storm unlike any Dubai had ever witnessed. European governments were outraged that their passports had been cloned for use in a covert killing. London condemned the act as an intolerable abuse of trust and expelled an Israeli diplomat. Ireland and Germany followed suit, demanding answers and issuing warnings to their citizens about potential identity theft. Dubai itself reacted with fury. The city's police chief publicly accused Mossad of orchestrating the operation, describing it as a violation of sovereignty and a deliberate assault on the UAE's reputation for safety. The Emirates issued arrest warrants through Interpol for the suspects identified in CCTV footage, though most had already vanished across continents. Israel, as was customary, neither confirmed nor denied involvement. Government officials offered only vague statements about the nation's right to self-defense. Yet, behind closed doors, Western intelligence services acknowledged what many already suspected. The operation bore the unmistakable precision of Mossad's Qaeda unit, elite assassins trained to operate without leaving traces. The fallout reverberated across the Middle East. Hamas declared al-Mabhouh a martyr, vowing revenge against Israel. Iran condemned the killing as an attack on its regional influence. The world had been reminded once again that intelligence wars rarely stay in the shadows for long. To understand the operation in Dubai, one must understand Mossad, Israel's legendary intelligence service. Established in 1949, just 1 year after the founding of the state, Mossad was created to safeguard Israel's survival in a hostile region. Its mandate extended beyond gathering intelligence. It included sabotage, covert diplomacy, and, when deemed necessary, targeted killings. From its earliest years, Mossad built a reputation for audacity. It tracked down Nazi war criminals in South America, most famously capturing Adolf Eichmann in Argentina in 1960. It carried out daring operations in Arab capitals, often under the noses of hostile governments. Unlike other intelligence agencies that worked quietly in the shadows, Mossad seemed to relish operations that left unmistakable signatures, sending messages as powerful as bullets. Its structure was lean but ruthless, with divisions specializing in human intelligence, counterterrorism, and foreign espionage. At the center was Caesarea, the division responsible for operations abroad. Within Caesarea operated Kaidan, the unit trained for assassination missions, sabotage, and high-risk strikes, such as the one that ended Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's life. By 2010, Mossad had become a symbol of both fear and fascination. To its supporters, it was the shield of a vulnerable nation. To its enemies, it was a ghostly hand that reached across borders, delivering death without warning. Within Mossad's structure, few names inspire as much fear as Kaidan, the covert unit believed to have carried out the Dubai assassination. Comprised of a small cadre of operatives, Kaidan, meaning bayonet in Hebrew, was trained to execute missions with absolute precision. Its members were masters of disguise, surveillance, and close-quarters elimination. Their assignments often required them to live under false identities for years, blending seamlessly into foreign societies until the moment of action. Supporting Kaidan was Unit 8200, Israel's formidable signals intelligence branch. Known as the country's equivalent of the NSA, Unit 8200 specialized in intercepting communications, hacking networks, and providing the technological backbone for operations abroad. In Dubai, it was suspected that encrypted communications, false passports, and even the duplication of hotel keycards had been enabled by such technical support. Together, these elite units operated as the spearhead of Israeli covert power. Their success relied not only on training, but also on the political will to sanction high-risk missions that defied international law. For adversaries of Israel, the mere whisper of Kaidan's involvement was enough to sow paranoia, reminding them that no hiding place was beyond reach. The assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was part of a long lineage of Mossad operations that blurred the line between state security and shadow warfare. In 1972, after the massacre of Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics, Mossad launched Operation Wrath of God, a campaign of targeted killings against members of Black September across Europe and the Middle East. That mission established the precedent. Enemies of Israel would be hunted no matter where they hid. In 1997, Mossad operatives attempted to assassinate Hamas leader Khalid Mashal in Amman, Jordan, using a lethal toxin applied to his ear. The mission failed when agents were captured, forcing Israel to deliver the antidote and release Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Hamas's spiritual leader, as part of the fallout. It was a stark reminder that even Mossad's precision could falter. Despite occasional failures, Mossad's record remained formidable. From sabotaging Iran's nuclear program with cyber attacks to eliminating senior Hezbollah commanders, the agency cultivated a reputation for reach and resourcefulness. The Dubai killing, though exposed by CCTV, fit squarely into this tradition, a message written in silence and subterfuge, meant to demonstrate that Mossad's arm could strike in the heart of a global city. At the highest levels of Israel's leadership, the decision to target Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was not taken lightly. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to intelligence insiders, personally authorized the mission. His motivation was twofold: to cripple Hamas's supply chain and to send a warning to Iran, whose partnership with Hamas threatened Israel's security. For Netanyahu and Mossad's director at the time, Meir Dagan, the strike was both tactical and symbolic. It demonstrated resolve, reinforced deterrence, and reminded Israel's enemies that no sanctuary, however distant or fortified, could guarantee survival. When Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's body was returned to Gaza, thousands poured into the streets to attend his funeral. The procession was both somber and defiant, with masked members of the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades marching alongside grieving family members. Hamas leaders hailed him as a martyr, a man who had dedicated his life to the struggle and paid the ultimate price. His coffin, draped in the green flag of Hamas, was carried through crowded streets while chants of vengeance echoed in the air. The immediate political impact was explosive. Hamas vowed swift retaliation against Israel, framing the assassination as proof of Mossad's endless war against their movement. In the wider Arab world, His killing was portrayed as an assault not just on Hamas, but on Palestinian dignity itself. In Israel, officials maintained silence, but newspapers openly speculated on Mossad's role, many viewing the mission as a daring but risky gamble. In that moment, al-Mabhouh became more than a commander. His death was transformed into a rallying cry, one that energized Hamas supporters, angered regional allies, and further deepened the cycle of confrontation. The funeral marked the start of his second life, as a symbol of resistance. The long-term consequences of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's assassination rippled far beyond Gaza. Within Hamas, his absence created a void in the logistical chain of weapons procurement. For months, shipments slowed, routes were disrupted, and rival commanders scrambled to assume his responsibilities. Yet over time, others filled the gap, proving that while individuals could be eliminated, the machinery of conflict endured. Diplomatically, the Dubai operation left scars. European nations hardened scrutiny of Israeli intelligence activities on their soil, and the scandal over forged passports damaged trust with long-standing allies. The United Arab Emirates, embarrassed by the breach of its sovereignty, intensified security and surveillance measures, seeking to ensure such a spectacle would never recur. For Israel, the operation was both triumph and cautionary tale. Mossad demonstrated its reach, but also drew unprecedented exposure. The release of CCTV footage transformed an invisible strike into a public spectacle, sparking debates over whether the benefits outweighed the costs. In the years that followed, al-Mabhouh's death became a symbol of the shadow war between Israel and its adversaries, a reminder that each elimination carried both tactical victories and strategic risks, feeding a cycle that showed no signs of ending. In the end, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics. Weapons continued to flow, conflicts raged on, and alliances shifted as they always had. Yet his assassination revealed a darker truth. The invisible wars waged by states do not end at borders, nor in battlefields. They unfold in airports, hotels, and city streets, where shadows carry passports and silence leaves no fingerprints. Governments sanction killers, nations deny involvement, and history records only fragments. What remains is a chilling reminder that the real war is often hidden, fought in places where truth is buried deepest.